Greetings, this is Chris Mendoza, and here's my Module 5 Game Jam final project, Milestone 3 Screencast. Starting off with a quick playthrough of the level as it is right now. The HUD and reticle are fully implemented with the reticle changing colors, depending on what kind of target you're shooting at. Scoreboards are also hooked up and reflect your current score. Destructible barrel targets have different scores based on your difficulty. There's the pause menu working as it should. The targets will end up having different flavor text that pulls from a word list, and currently they are only barrels, when later they will be a variety of objects. And here's the checkpoint. Currently it's set to easy mode for testing purposes. Once you clear the checkpoint, it will reset your score. It doesn't do that currently. And this is one of the bugs that we encountered. The track spline, when it re-merges, there are some issues where it sets you up. We'll need to refactor that and probably allow the player to choose which spline they spawn at so that we could test it a bit easier on the later parts of the level. And here's a little run through of what happens if you fail at the first checkpoint. We did have another bug where the player boat and the gun kept spawning much too large, and thankfully myself and Brian ended up fixing that. The default difficulty for the game is rather challenging, so failing this checkpoint might happen more often than not. And lastly, here is the title screen that I've worked on. Still a work in progress, obviously. I did run into some issues where mouse over and click events didn't work, but I got that all worked out. Now for a quick overview of what I did this week. So I created these spreadsheets for the various systems, designs, difficulties, and such. I also gray boxed the entire level using BSP brushes. I also implemented the player level start sequencing along with a delay in the rate of fire to make it a little bit more difficult. Here's the code for the reticle trace and the color changing for the larger reticle only. I put together this procedural ocean material. It still needs some work, but it also has a post-processing volume, so it looks a little bit more underwatery. Mainly I didn't want to use a singular texture and have it look really tiled. I laid the track spline down and populated the level with the targets for testing, as well as the scoreboards. Brian did the vast majority of the checkpoint programming. I just went in there and added some sequencing so that the player would get launched at the end, and if they won, it would show that they won. I set up a lot of infrastructure for data tables and structs so that I could just import from the spreadsheets into the game for setting difficulty settings or handling and target values. Here in the game instance blueprint, I initialized a lot of these values so that they would be carried over into the game as soon as it's started. Later on, the player will be able to change the difficulty setting from the main menu before they start the level. Originally, the scorekeeping was done in the player blueprint, and I moved it to the game mode blueprint instead. This was just to keep it tidy because I prefer using an interface. I also implemented state switching for pausing and menu handling because it ends up being a lot cleaner and less confusing. One of the last things I did this week was create a base target with a destructible mesh, along with all the damage application that can come from the player's projectile, and a little added animation for when the debris needs to disappear so we don't have performance issues. This tag system for the actor helps with the reticle color changing, as well as the value of the target. Here you can see how I determine the value of the target, as well as pulling the multiplier based on the difficulty level. Lastly, here is the widget for the title screen. And this is the barrel that's on the title screen with the various option planks that are flying out of it. The main issue I ran into here was I did not know that you needed to have the input mode set to game and UI so that you could have mouse over events and clicks interact with the game world objects. I had it set to UI only for the longest time before I figured that out. So here's one last look at the level and its various rooms. Thank you for watching.